Hello and welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. I'm Will.
I'm James, and welcome back to show number 32. We're racking them up, Will.
Yes.
And back on the road this week for one of the interviews we recorded late last year in South Australia. Before we get to that, though, look back at, the more recent news we've covered, including a big interview that you put together last week.
Yeah, so Scotty Hargraves leaving Bolter. Always a pleasure to chat with Scotty about anything, whether it's, could chat to him about music for hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's, so it's been a little over 5 years since the sale to CUB/ABI, which then the owner became Asahi. Sorry, that gets a bit complicated. But so a number of staff have stepped away, a number of founders as well, are less active in it because of the terms of the 5-year contract. And Scotty decided it was also time for him to move on.
And drink margaritas in his pool.
He did mention that several times over the conversation. But yeah, it was a really good chance to kind of reflect on the experience for him at the 10-year sort of experience of what he enjoyed about it. As anyone who sort of followed Bolter closely over the last year or two will know that Scotty's been on the road a lot, making very delicious beers with some of the best brewers in the world who he's fortunate enough to count as his good mates. So yeah, it was I thought it was a really great chance and conversation to have with him.
Yeah, for sure. The concreter done good.
Yeah, it's amazing. We didn't even get into that. I was like, let's just stick with the Bolter story. We'll have to get him on the podcast at some point, maybe once he's revealed what he's going to do next, which I do genuinely believe won't be much for a while. It sounds like he's pretty keen on chilling out for a long time.
And he's always said, and he said in that interview as well, that he is a bit of a control freak and sort of has to always sort of do things to the absolute, the way he wants doing it. So I'd imagine it's been a fairly intense, pretty much 10 years at Bolter, let alone the 5 years of, I guess, adjusting the business to work within the framework of a multinational. But, it's a good read. I was very happy with that one, Will, when it landed in my inbox for proofing. And I guess looking to the next generation of brewers, another piece you ran this week, which I guess we've been sort of doing some, some support for Bendigo TAFE Kangan Institute about driving people to their courses for a while. But something has changed a little bit this year.
Yeah, so they've installed a brewery, so students can now use it. It's sort of set up like any professional brewery would be, tiny system, 200 litre, but they've even got a canning line in there, so they can package the beers, test it after packaging, all that kind of stuff. So it's really about opening up the flexibility. It's not the first of its kind in the country. Brew Lab in Queensland has been doing it for a number of years, and the universities have their brew kits as well. But I thought it was a good chance to talk about how they sort of are running the course so that it fits around people's busy lives and schedules. Obviously, brewing something a lot of people come to late, so it's good to be able to train while also keeping your career before you change career potentially. Yeah.
And with Shiv,
yes,
the Zythologist leading the way, so that was pretty cool. And I guess maintaining the brewery theme. This week we're launching another new campaign, I guess celebrating the best of the beer world. So it's the Bluestone Yeast Brewery of the Month, which people will be able to make their nominations, I guess, for any brewery. Could be their local, could be one they love visiting, could be big, could be small, Australian, obviously. And so just jump on the website, craftypint.com/bluestone, BLUESTONE, and there'll be a short nomination form there. Just want to, once a month, we want to shout out, I guess, brewers doing great things around the country. So it might be someone who works at a brewery nominating, the favourite brewery, someone from the industry, or it could just be a beer lover who just wants to give a shout out to their favourite local.
Yeah, and to get people thinking about it, I've come in with a brewery of the month of my own. I've been to this brewery many times this month, Bridge Road in Brunswick East, their Melbourne venue, except for the airport, of course, which opened recently. I've been seeing a lot of movies recently, and they're right near the new cinema near me as well. So it's been a really good cinema FOMO. Free shout out there. So they've been I've been calling in a lot and really enjoying everything they do, really. But particularly, there's a pizza there that I love, a broccoli pizza called Broccolo Picante. I think I'm saying that right. So that's why they're my brewery of the month. It's for me. I had that pizza. I was like, that is so good. They do food there really well. A lot of breweries obviously do pizza, but they've got a different spin on it, particularly in their Brunswick East venue, and they've got a lot of other food as well. So yeah, maybe when you're thinking about your own brewery of the month, you could think about some of how they do food or anything like that, then, and how that makes you really want to go there.
Well, I guess that's a nice segue into our main guest this week as well, because the Wheaty, obviously now a brewery, the Wheaty Brewing Co. Makes great beers, award-winning beers. They've expanded over the years. They have an Oak Furter, which Bridge Road have up in Beechworth.
And they love using it together as well. Whenever Ben from Bridge Road goes to brew at the Wheaty, that's often a focus.
Yeah, but I think also that venue, before and after it's been a brewery, has also celebrated live music, independence, whiskey, great wine, good hospitality. So there's many different elements you might want to nominate that brewery for. But yeah, we had to catch up with Jade, one of the founders, who's now, I guess, the benevolent dictator. Been running it solo for a number of years. We had to catch up with her before Christmas. Again, it was a bit like, I guess, the chat with Mazen. We probably could have sat down there and gone, "Okay, Jade, off you go."
Yeah.
just let her.
See you later.
Yeah. But it was great, and it wasn't just a chat about the history of. Well, it even went back, I guess, before her the time at the Wheaty, her first jobs in beer, in pubs, sort of reflecting on how that's really changed over the time in Adelaide. I guess her real fondness for good beer from the early days, and then for good whiskey and for independence. Like, I guess independence is probably the main thread throughout everything we chat about. We talk a lot about live music and how live music venues are. Independent live music venues are even more under threat potentially than small breweries. The same issues with beer. It's it's the duopolies crushing everyone else and getting vertical integration. But also, just talks about, a lot about the collaboration she's done with brewers the world over, her thoughts on, the future and what needs to happen for beer. Yeah. It's pretty great.
Yeah, it's a great chat. It's definitely one of the longer episodes. Well, it would be the longest we've done, I think.
I don't know. Mazen would have been close.
Back to back, so don't expect... We haven't changed the runtime of the show. We do expect them to maybe be a bit shorter, but when you have guests like Jade and Mazen on, you really do want to get everything you can from them.
So that's up after the break. Bit of a shout out for our beer club, the Crafty Cabal, as well. We've got another great new deal going up in Brisbane. We've had a listing to the website recently, as we mentioned last week, for My Beer Deal, like the new sort of brewski venue in Fortitude Valley, Alfred Street Bar and Bottle-O. Members can go in there and get 2-for-1 schooners every week, which is pretty cool. And also we've got a big giveaway going for another Brisbane brewery, Revel Brewing. You can win some cases of their beer at the minute, so jump on craftykabal.com or the Crafty Pint app to check that out. And then I guess the only other thing we've got in today's show, the main thing would be we've got the first winners in our Have You Done a Rallings campaign to promote good beer citizens from around Australia.
Yes.
So that'll come up in the middle, in the break between the main interview with Jade.
Yeah, and you'll be chatting with Craig in that one.
I will be chatting with Craig in that one as well, yes.
Just so people remember who's who. Great. Well, let's get into the episode. We'll keep this brief because it's a long chat, but really enjoy it. And if you do, make sure you like and subscribe. Cheers.
Cheers.
Calling all brewers. Entries are now open for the 2025 Melbourne Royal Australian International Beer Awards. This is your opportunity to showcase your craft, compete on an international stage, and receive invaluable feedback from an esteemed panel of Australian and international beer judges at the world's largest annual beer competition. To find out more and submit your entries, head to melbourneroyal.com.au/beer. Don't miss out. Entries close Friday, 7th of March.
Jade, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
So, we're going to cover a lot of ground with this. We can tell you've obviously had a very long career in the beer industry, but we wanted to start with going back to the early days of the Wheaty and when you took it over and kind of what you saw in the place.
Sure. So it's almost 22 years to the day, actually, that we got the keys to the Wheaty. So it was January 2003 that we picked up the keys. And at that point, probably best described as, affectionately regarded shambles. So it was very run down, non-pokey pub, which in Adelaide at the time was rare, sadly still is quite rare. So non-pokey pub was a live music venue, but had it was kind of existed in a parallel universe. It was not subject to any kind of regulation, inspection, or many punters coming through the doors either. So it was very run down. The only phone on the premises was a blue phone, so it was literally a pay phone. And the publican at the time, our predecessor, conducted all his business, such as it was, through that pay phone. It was bolted fairly securely onto the wall. I think it was the most securely fastened thing in our premises, because it was ripped off the wall about once or twice a week, and someone would hot foot it up Albert Street with the 30 cents that was in there from the payphone. So very, very run down. First day went down into the cellar. It was a fairly mild day like today, sort of, low 20s, thinking, we'll just see what we've got here. There were 2 taps. It was pouring West End Draft and Cooper's Pale, and you could pick the locals because they'd never drink anything off tap, because it was literally unpourable. You'd pour 3 or 4 jugs to get a schooner. There was a glass fronted fridge with stubbies, and regulars would always often help themselves to those, because the publican couldn't necessarily be found, so they'd help themselves to a stubby, have a couple, leave the money on the bar and walk out without seeing him. As I said, quite a character. Went down the cellar first day, and mild day, and it was 45 degrees down there. So there was a great big compressor driving refrigeration. Our predecessor had thought about putting a refrigerated cold room downstairs, so he actually put the refrigeration panels up, and then lost interest, and that was it. So it was actually worse than not having the insulation panels up, because it retained its heat. So it was basically sitting there, the beer was broiling in the lines. It was pretty much unpourable. So one of the first things, obviously, we had to do before we opened, and we closed for 3.5 months just to renovate. So myself, Trotty, and Liz, 3 of us who'd met working at the Exeter Hotel in Rundle Street, which is another non-pokey pub, owned by pokey pub people, but a non-pokey pub. We cut our hospo teeth there, pub teeth there, and worked there during the 90s when it was pretty rough and ready, and good
Still
live music
quite a
scene.
famous pub.
It is, yeah. I mean,
today,
it's a classic pub. It's again kind of. It's one of those pubs that, I don't want to call it indie washing, but it's kind of pokey, no pokey washing in a sense.
Yeah.
So not a lot, but there are several, non-pokey pubs that are owned by pokey groups, which, for me kind of cancels out, which is a bit of a shame. And it, the publican I worked under, Bins, he owned another pub with his brother with pokies. Now it's part of a group, with pokey pubs, which is sad, because as a pub, it's a great pub. It's close to the uni, behind the hospital, etc., etc. And East End Rundle Street, has had a lot of stuff happen to it the last couple of decades, 3 decades that I've sort of been involved. But still a classic pub. But not it was Cooper's. Basically it was only Cooper's on tap at the time. I think they've got a few other things now. Always a very good wine list. So, we're spoilt for choice when it comes to wineries in SA. So always a very good wine list there. I taught myself how to, appreciate, or at least, enjoy malt whiskey, working at the X. I like the idea of a malt whiskey, but I didn't like it. And then it's like, no, a knockoff. And it was training, like it was conscious thing. It's like, right, I'm going to get a Talisker 10. It was a very, very, very straightforward, like 4 malts, all very good ones. Talisker 10, every night knockoff, have it with a dash of dry. It's like, then less dry, then soda, then less soda, then neat. And then got to the point I could only drink it neat. It's like, good, I've developed an addiction. But we met there, and then Nick was selling. We weren't, I wasn't going to work for anyone else.
Was that your first role in hospo as well at the X?
Second pub. First pub was the Director's Hotel in Gooder Street. And that was kind of like everyone's first hospo job. It was pretty dodge. I actually ended up going there after I was actually training next door, just doing some Wing Chun, and there was a pub next door. We'd go to knockoffs, and it's like, actually, I was 18, it's about turning 19. I need a job. I can pour some beers, and it was a good bartender there. The bar manager there was great. He was about the only great thing about that place. The odor was super dodge. Still chasing super from that one. He, we'd get reports. It was like, yeah, this, he was taken out of, and it disappeared. He was an ex-Olympian, water polo player, which is fairly obscure.
Hadn't made millions off it, I'd imagine.
No, but there's something about sports people who just automatically think they can run a pub,
Right.
and he was very much one of those. Had a handful of pokies. which I mean, I never liked them, and after that, I just like, no, can't be near these things.
But that would have helped colour
ever
what you
again.
wanted from your
Yeah, I
pub,
pretty
so
much
to
knew. I
speak.
mean,
Yeah.
this fella, it was, he, as I said, did pretty much nothing by the book, and it was the day that he asked me to work upstairs, and I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Oh, we've got some some Japanese businessmen who are." I'm like, "Cool, well, I can work the bar up there." He's like, "No, I just want you to talk to them." I said, no, I can work the bar, but I'm not talking to anyone. What are you talking about? And he wouldn't say it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, you can't say it. It's not going to
Wow.
happen, see you later. So, it didn't last. And it was in everyone's interest, I think, that I didn't go upstairs because it would not have ended well for them. So I left there, went to the X, and was there for most of the 90s, and then met Liz and Trotty. And then we're like, the non-pokey thing is essential for us. Live music venue was also essential, original live music. And beer was my thing. So, I was at uni, joined the homebrew club, grew up drinking sort of Cooper's Stout and, Grandpa's West End Draft and Southwark Bitter.
Yeah. So that had been there right from the start. Like you were instantly drawn to
beer.
whatever beer you could get that wasn't what everyone else was drinking.
Yeah,
I mean,
really
early on.
Grandpa's, Southwark Bitter always, really kind of intrigued me. It was a bit too much at the time, but then I thought, no, this is something in this. I'm going to persevere.
Yeah.
And my folks loved stout, so they were stout drinkers. They weren't big beer drinkers, but they loved stout.
And were Liz and Trotty into beer as much as you were, or were you the
Not
one
as
driving
much.
that side of things?
Liz definitely more wine. I mean,
Yeah.
Trotty came from a wine family.
Yeah.
And so she very much grew up with wine. Trotty drank widely, so there wasn't too much quality booze that she didn't like. And a crisp lager was Trotty's,
But
beer
the
of
key word
choice.
there is
So-
quality. At least it was quality booze.
Oh,
whatever it was,
absolutely, yeah. And only one way to find out. But no, very very much, crisp lager, and beer was my thing. Homebrew club at Flinders Uni. Ended up spending a lot more time, as many people do, in the tavern, Flinders Tavern, and home brewing than my law degree, and then worked at the Exeter to pay my way through uni, and then ended up enjoying hospital a lot more than my law degree.
Yeah.
So law school dropout. But when Nick was selling the X, it's like, well, we didn't want to work for anyone else there because we were pretty much running it at the time anyway. And then it's basically made a pitch for the Exeter, which we were thankfully unsuccessful for. I mean, we were pretty young in the whole scheme of things. Pretty ambitious. I mean,
I was your first venue.
29 years old, I reckon.
Yeah.
And it was very busy in a city.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have run it without doubt.
Yeah.
But it was pretty serious risk and financial risk, and we were seen as a financial risk because we were effectively green around the ears, and we're obviously no match for pokey money. So again, I think we dodged a bullet. We would have retired by now. The place is a gold mine, but there were forces down that street that wasn't really that interested in. So when I started there, we'd have security Friday, Saturday nights, and occasionally have something to do. By the time I finished, sort of 9 years later, we had security every night. They were busy every night. Just a lot more aggro, a lot more violence, a lot more just meaningless violence.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people would come to the city, to the East End to cause a bit of trouble. And early days it was a couple of man babies, a bit of biffo, but there was some kind of honor in it. And then towards the end it was like 2 or 3 people onto one, and then it was 2 or 3 people onto one and actually hurting them, not just it was like stomping and knives. And I'm like, I toured for this shit. I don't want this. And you could resist that to a degree, but there were, it was just, I didn't want to be in the city anymore. So, it was
so much for the city of churches, honestly.
Well, yeah, I think very perfectly the city of churches, like, that's what it's about, isn't it? So it's just all under the surface.
Yeah.
But so that was an element to it, and it's like, no, actually we want something that we can mold a lot more, so better to have an affectionately regarded shambles than something that already had quite a personality. And, we could have guided it, but there's only so much we could have done.
Yeah.
And certainly, could have introduced, some good beer and something other than Cooper's into that environment. And I note that they kind of have now a bit, but it different kind of setup, different kind of vibe, and it would only ever have been a leasehold, for example. So, a tricky landlord by all accounts. So Weedy, affectionately regarded shambles, but suited us perfectly in that regard. when it came to talking to banks about borrowing money to buy the leasehold, it was regarded as having negative goodwill. So it was it was worse than a startup. It was like, no, you're worse than zero, negative goodwill.
No one's ever going to go inside there.
Correct. Like it's driving people, it's actively driving people away. And so we couldn't get money. The conventional wisdom was very much at the time, so this is early 2000s, that Adelaide can't support another non-pokie pub. Like it already had half a dozen. That's all it can support. We knew that wasn't the case, but obviously couldn't convince a bank of that. So negative goodwill. We had to effectively pretend we were going on holidays and buying cars and take out personal loans to buy the leasehold for a pub because it was seen as because they'd lend us money to go on holiday, but not to buy the leasehold of a pub. So I did that. Got the keys beginning of 2003. Closed for months, 3-4 months, and just renovated. It was old school kind of working parties, and every day 16.
And
16
aside
days,
from the state of the cellar, like what was the rest of it like? And I guess what was Theberton like? Was it ready for what you had in mind?
Well, it was going to have to be, I suppose. It was kind of very much a build it, and they will come. I mean, to be fair, the Weedy was always had a good heart. Like it was always a community pub, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world. Our predecessor Brownie, because he was in financial strife, to just put pokies in. Rip out the band room, put pokies in, and he would have been sorted. Like and particularly because Theberton was a lot more working class then, quite frankly. Light industrial, we're zone light industrial, so a lot of light industry. There used to be a lot of heavy industry here, smelters and so on. We can't eat veggies we grow in our own garden, for example. Like it's contaminated site. Wow. So they had to replace the soil in our neighbours, 3 or 4 times over. So yeah, pretty rough and ready sort of, industrial / working class neighbourhood. And a lot of post-war migrants here. So fantastic. I love Theberton. A great place to live, but a bit rough around the edges, certainly, 20 years ago. But it would have been the easiest thing for Brownie to put poker machines in, and he didn't, because he hated them and he saw them as antisocial, and the opposite of what a pub should be about, which is exactly what I think about them. It would have been the easiest thing for his parents, who own the freehold, to have just sold it to the site to developers, because it was worth nothing as a pub, or less than nothing as a pub. They'd pay you to take it, but they loved the place and wanted it to remain a pub. So it was very much. It was known as a country pub in the city, and it was, we bought it on a handshake, which was, not advisable at all, and not, not something I'd recommend. But it was literally, Brownie's financials were on the back of a napkin, literally. Oh, I think it was about this, and I think it was about that, and I gave that to our accountants. So that doesn't really meet the minimum criteria. I'm like, that's all we're gonna get, it's all we're gonna get. And same with Bob and Joy, it was very much a handshake, and which was amazing. So they trusted us. We moved in, and then spent 3-4 months, ripping the place apart and kind of putting it back together as best we could, effectively on a handshake. And then, it's obviously a lifetime's worth of work, and there's another 20, 30, 40 years to go. But it always had, good heart and good bones. But out the back here, for example, in the band room, was absolute shambles. It was covered in brush fencing. So homemade brush fencing on the walls and the ceiling. There were homemade bar heaters on the ceiling. When we pulled it down, there were desiccated rats and birds in there. Like, so much dust. It was about to go up any second. It's amazing that it hadn't. There was a bar, like you could see the outline of the bar here. It was just a little dry bar setup, and it was one of my jobs for one of the days that we were here was to dismantle the bar, and I just hammer 1, 2, kicked it, and the whole thing fell apart. And they were using that up until they closed, and
just fell into dust as well. You
pretty much,
sweep
and
it
it's
away.
like, oh, that's it. But underneath that was some original stained glass. So they knocked out. The 80s had a lot to answer for in terms of picking up a beautiful old pub, and so a lot of the original stained glass was ripped out, and they put those ineffective extraction fans in the stained glass, and we found 2 piles of stained glass that had been taken out, and the bar and the lounge windows in the front bar, effectively those put back together. So that some pretty amazing finds like that. Bit of treasure, which was magic.
How many skips?
Oh, I lost count. Like, how many skips, how many trips to Bunnings? You know,
Yeah.
it was, luckily there's one just around the corner because it was like 3 or 4 times a day. The beautiful old fridge behind the bar, so it's Tassie Oak, South Australian made. We used to make fridges just around the corner in SA. And I've always been obsessed with those beautiful old wooden bar fridges. And there was what we got here was just glass and stainless. And it's like, no, we need an old fridge. So I bought that at auction and brought it. I'd measured it up. It's like, yeah, it's going to fit there. No worries. we bought it in. It's about 400 kilos. Tried to get it through. The door wouldn't fit. Took the door surrounds off. Wouldn't fit. Well, only like 10 mil out, like so small. It's like, I'm sure we can make it fit. Like we just couldn't get it through that door. So like, okay, we'll just move it into the front bar. And we'll wait till we run, pull the rest of it apart, and then we'll move it in. And as we were moving it through the front door, next to the pool table, the whole thing nearly went straight into the cellar because it turns out there was lino and pig bristle squares all over the floor. That was the only thing holding the floor up in the front bar over the highest traffic area, and we could literally see the cellar, underneath. So thankfully it didn't fall down there. We wheeled it into the corner of the pub. It sat there for 3 months, and then we were a few weeks away from opening, and we're like, how are we going to get this in? So we had to take the end of the bar off and then move it over the floorboards, which I had flipped and stripped by hand and put back. Hope they held. and then just old school, we just got a couple of metal pipes, put it, because we got the cellar trapdoor behind the bar as well, so it could have, various opportunities to fall into the cellar, and then put the, metal pipes, rolled it over, and it fit within 20 mils. Like, it is never leaving. It is never leaving. And in fact, this morning we had an old fella come and replace all the seals on it. So it's now part of our refrigeration system. We've done quite a bit of work on it. It's the most expensive old bar fridge in the world. But a fella who came to work on it, he's close to retirement. He used to build them for his apprenticeship. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and that's a dying skill and a dying art, and he loves those things as well. So yes, very rundown, sort of parallel universe that it existed in. And I kind of we liked that, blank slate. So the first thing we did was obviously replace all of the beer dispensing equipment, put a refrigerated cold room downstairs. I think we ended up when we opened running with maybe 6 taps. I think so. We went from 2 to 6.
What was the opening day tap lineup? Yeah.
That's just stretching the memory, but there definitely would have been a bit of Cooper's on tap. So there would have been, I think, Cooper's sparkling, stout, and pale and draft. We got James Squire Porter because that was my mission to get that beer.
Yeah.
It was a lovely beer, and I think it was one of the more interesting darks. So James Squire Porter, and I reckon we may have had the amber as well.
Okay.
And then followed shortly by Little Creatures. So again, we were one of the first venues outside Fremantle to have Little Creatures on tap. And when we were cranking for quite a few years with Creatures, we'd have the Pale Rogers and Little Creatures Pilsner was our house lager. And that was pretty controversial. Creatures Pale was pretty controversial. But we were a pallet of kegs a week across the Nullarbor.
Yeah.
And that was the Rogers was the the MIDI house lager, and then the Pale. I think the Pale by far was the most controversial, being South Australian. So it was kind of seen as un-South Australian to drink anything other than Cooper's Pale. And people would come in, say, what would you like? I'd like a Pale. It was like, well, which one? There is only one. That one was always Cooper's.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, actually, there's this. And then, quite a few people would be like, no, but, I want to drink local. And at that point, there weren't any really local craft breweries. So it's like, all right, you got us on that one for the time being. Like, you'll keep, we'll get you later. And then other people obviously would try it. And we knew if the beer was good enough, we just coax people to try it, and then if they were genuinely interested in flavor and character, then they'd fall in love with beer as well. So it was matching people, even though they didn't necessarily know what they wanted, we'd match them with flavors and so on. And we could see that, see the light bulb moments, all these customers coming through, and often we were the only place to get a lot of these beers. Moo Brew was another one that we got really early days. I just pursued Moo and said, look, we want your beer on tap, you want your beer on tap here, and they're like, we're South Australia, where's that in Adelaide? Where's that Theberton? And I say, I was fairly insistent. I think OJ says I was sort of stalking him, perhaps. It's like, just sell us a pallet of beer. Let's just see how it goes. Exactly right. And if it goes well, then keep selling us a beer. If it doesn't, then that's cool too. But I knew, it was really, obviously, really good beer. And our punters, by and large, were up for it. There was a bit of dragging people kicking and screaming into, flavorful beer for a while. And it took a little bit longer than I thought. It was probably 2 or 3 years, really, before the momentum started to build, before customers started bringing their friends in saying, hey, look, this is what they do, this is what they've got. We had a fairly extensive bottled beer list as well, mostly imports, but other interstate crafties. Mountain Goat was another beer that we had on really early. And that was, you could see people just going, bang, 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 wow, there's all this amazing beer world out there. And we were, getting some imported stuff on tap. So with some amazing Kiwis as they became available, 8 Wide and, the Garage Project. And then we had the American breweries. Rogue was exciting at the time. And a lot of stuff one off tap. So local stuff, and then interstate gear, and then just getting more and more of the imports. We'd have showcases. Often we'd have the only kegs of that beer in the country, and more and more of a following. And then it just sort of picked up a life of its own. And then other people started, catching on that this whole craft beer thing might have something in it. But yeah, the pale was interesting. That was probably the hardest fight here. It's double-edged sword in South Australia with Coopers, because on the one hand, people are used to drinking beer you can't see through. They're used to drinking ale, and they're used to drinking, dark ale, stout, sparkling. Unlike the eastern states where it's lagerland. However, there is so much devotion to Coopers that it's kind of seen that's the decision is made. That's it, we're done. So to coax people into drinking other ales, other darks, other stouts, other pales, that was it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Then when other local breweries started to come online, so Love of the Beer House, Brew Boys and so on, and we could pour their hoppy beers and their pales, and we could say, actually, there is another local pale. So that, just saying, I want to drink something South Australian, not good enough. We just kind of force people to try these things, and obviously not everyone likes them, but the people who really did, and then they sort of started their beer journey, and we started. It took a while to get local brewers to really jump into the hoppy beers and brew some big IPAs. I think there was a reluctance there, and I sort of didn't think there was demand.
Yeah, so more sort of Euro styles, British styles, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, porters and oatmeal stouts and English style pales and a few pales, but trying to get like just a good West Coast, for example, was difficult. It's like really there's demand for it, and then we'd get Mikkeller or 8 Wide, even when started releasing these beautifully hopped beers, and they'd sell out in a night. Like we'd have lineups out the door. Like there was huge demand for these beers, but it took a while to convince local brewers to kind of really jump in. But when they did, they were really well received. And then the plan was always to build our own brewery, and that took a bit longer than we'd thought as well. But we got there.
Yeah, just a step back from that, independence has obviously been important from day one in terms of Coopers, Little Creatures, Moo Brew, like chasing these people to get their beers when they might have wanted to send them here. You would have formed some pretty good friendships with independent brewers who are no longer independent.
Yes.
And then it would have been a case of, that's it, you're done. Have you managed to maintain, had you maintained relationships, friendships, with those people who, I guess, formed such an important part of the early days of the Wheatie?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. It was always, always a bit saddened, like, certainly professionally. It's like, oh, damn, there goes another one. But also personally as well, you just kind of, there is another model, and I think in the US there are examples of this, and in Australia for a long time, and then I think Stone and Wood, the obvious example is they were kind of too independent to sell, too independent to fail. Like they're surely not them, the poster boys for independence, and it's kind of the narrative that you get to a certain point where that you don't have any option. Like you need to sell if you want to get to a certain size, if you need to keep your shareholders happy, if you overcapitalize, yada yada yada. But it's seen as almost inevitable that happens here, and that's false. It's not the case. Like you can grow sustainably. You could decide to not grow as much as as you might need to if you then need to sell. Like it's not an inevitability; it's a choice. And I think a lot of people making choices, and if that's the choice you make and you own it, that's what it is. It's like kind of fair enough. It's not my way of doing things, and I disagree with that as a model, but I get it. It's when there's you pretend to be one thing or have principles about why you're not doing something in a certain way, and you're not going to sell out. Your independence is important. This is why it's important, and you bring people along with you, and then you get offered enough money, tap on the shoulder, and all of a sudden your principles go out the window, and it's like, actually, no, don't worry about that. We can be bought. That's what I take issue with, and every time it happens, it does devalue the industry, and I think it just chips away at that trust, and ultimately a lot of what we do in hospitality, but in beer as well, is like people trust you, with when showing them different flavors and that you've made something to the best of your ability, and you're doing it because you're interested in it and you believe in it, and there's a different way of doing things, and then if it turns out there's not actually a different way of doing things and we're going to sell it, it's like, oh really, that's a bit of a shame. Does it always all just come down to money? And and I get, and obviously it, in the one sense, it's all the same decision, and the result is the same. In another sense, obviously there are individual circumstances, and there are things that we'll never know what that influence people's decisions to do these things. And I'd still have a beer with all these people, but I'd bloody well tell them what I think.
Talking of making things the best of your ability, we'll take a break now and come back to talk about that and the growth of the Wheaty Brewing Corp.
Yes, very good.
Hey guys, it's Craig and James here, and we are talking Rallings nominations. Have you done a Rallings? It's our campaign where we're celebrating good beer citizens across the country. James, we've been running this. We've had it open for a few weeks now. How many nominations have we got coming in? Is it taking off?
Oh yeah, no, we've had a couple of dozen nominations in already from all over the country. Brewers, sales reps, just beer lovers nominating people. I guess going above and beyond, to support their local beer community or to celebrate local beer. But I think you've picked out a few highlights, haven't you, for our first full section?
I do. So it's been hard, James. There's been so many great nominations that have come in, but I've picked a few out, and we're gonna choose a winner. So the first one is nominated from Joshua Tompkins, who's nominated Will Horan and his team at Duquesne Brewing in Launceston, Tasmania. Now, you know these guys, James?
Yeah. So Will, actually, he's a good friend of someone who wrote the article for us a few years ago. He started off just sort of, I guess, contract brewing, got a really good reputation, especially for his pills. Then opened a brew pub with Sam, Willie Smith's Cider Sam, in Launceston a few years ago, and it's just gone off. Like they've just had a really great start to life in Launceston. So never hear anything but good stuff about them. And as we have done again here.
Here's some more good stuff then, James. So Will, Josh decided to become a brewer at the age of 41, and Will, instead of talking him out of it, really helped him out. So supporting him while he was doing his certifications and so on, offering him the opportunity to come in and shadow him through brew days, to get experience working on the kit and actually building up his practical skill set there. Yeah. So it's really helped him hone his brewing skills, and he wants to give Will a shout out. So nice one, Will.
Excellent.
My second one is from a beer lover, Lance Hayden from the Blue Mountains. He's nominating Murray's Porter's Liquor in Glenbrook, New South Wales. So led by the legend Murray Croft. Not only are they delivering, great fresh craft beer options every week to their fans, but once a year, come time for Gab Sydney, Murray and his crew organise a full-on bus tour down to Sydney so that craft beer lovers in the area can attend the night session. So, what a bit of above and beyond service there, James.
Yeah, no, I've heard nothing but great stuff about the Murray's group. He's got 3, I believe, bottle stores in that part of the Blue Mountains now, and they're just a really good team, like I said, but led by Murray. Just going above and beyond. I wasn't aware of the Gabs buses, but I had heard plenty of other good stuff about them, and the lengths they'll go to make sure their customers get what they want, and and are learning about beer along the way.
Yeah, nice. But my winner this week, James, goes to nominated by Alexia Smith from a small charity called Cheers to Change, and she is nominated Reese Palmer, Devon Island, and Michelle Island from Buddy Brewing for their help in supporting a recent mental health charity campaign that Alexia was running. Apparently, when Alexia approached the team with the idea for an event, they really jumped on board full throttle. They gave them the venue for free. They helped with marketing, social media, even getting other sponsors on board. And it took it from one level to an entirely new level, raising over $15,000 for the Black Dog Institute. There's one quote here in Alexia's nomination which I love, which is Buddy Brewing's team exemplifies the spirit of collaboration and generosity that makes the craft beer community so unique. So they're my winner for this week's Have You Done a Rallings campaign.
A good choice, and I think I guess that's the whole idea of celebrating good beer citizens, is to the spirit of collaboration, generosity. That's what we're all about with this campaign. So we'd love to get some more nominations in. All you have to do if you want to nominate is head to craftypint.com/rallings, RALLINGS. There's a very short nomination form on there. Just say who you want to nominate, who you are, and why. We'll be reading out some more nominees and winners every couple of weeks for the time being, and also doing a brief showcase of those that we select on the website in the same week that we run them on the podcast as well. So, great start. And it's been just great to see this. They literally have come in from all corners of the country as well. So that's been really, really encouraging.
Yeah, great. Well, check it out, and we'll see you next week for more Have You Done a Rallings nominees and winners.
Cheers.
Jade, obviously we've got a brewery behind us. Do you want to talk us through a bit about how you went from being the Wheatie to also Wheatie Brewing Co.?
Yeah, sure. So it was always the plan to build our own brewery. So loved sourcing beer from other breweries around the world, around the country, around the state. But it was always the plan to kind of build our own brewery, make our own beer, and walk the talk effectively. Because you had the opportunity to try literally thousands of beers, various showcases, and so on. I thought this is
brew with some of the best brewers around the world on a 50-litre homebrew kit as
indeed,
well.
Indeed. That was kind of cool. That was, even if most of them had anchovies.
Del Borgo, all these amazing brewers.
Yeah, and that was, the great advantage of having been sort of, be a specialist pub for a decade previous, is just had all these amazing friendships with brewers from around the world. And I'd always pick their brains whenever they were here. What do you think about this? How do you do that? What's this about? And the beer industry still is, I think, very generous. Most people are very generous with their time and their knowledge, and any kind of issues, or questions you've had, you just hit someone up and they're like, oh, yeah, this is what we, did or do, and try this and, call this person. So lots of beer questions. I had plenty of dubious, beer theories that I wanted to test out on a kit, and having, a pretty, potted homebrew history myself, I just thought, no, what could possibly go wrong? We need to build our own brewery. And after I'd spent about a year in the States in between leaving the Exeter and finding the Wheatie, working at the Grace and then finding the Wheatie, that the venues that most sort of resonated with me were ones that would brew their own beer, 1 beer, 2 beers, a handful of beers, just sharp, tight, technical. Loved what they did. Served it on on site, and I've always thought that the beer is best enjoyed in the shadow of the brewery in which it's brewed. Like it's going to be best at its source. Like so many people have been to Ufleku in Prague, and I was 19, so that just that experience blew my mind. So a couple of beer experiences like that. Berliner Weisse in Berlin, in a Schuss, which almost got me into a fight because you're meant to have it Mitch's, but you just thought so many people had those beer experiences. Alaskan smoked porter in the US. It's like this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want to do with my life. So then that was after the Exeter sold year plus overseas. Came back here. It's like this is what we want to do. Sourced other people's beers, but still wanted to scratch that itch. Essentially, it took a lot longer than we planned. So it got to the point where either put in a kitchen or a brewery, and I was more committed, more organized than Liz and Trotty were, so the brewery was the one that got the jump. And initially, again, we were quite modest. There was a little area just behind me this side, like 36 square meters. There was an old shed there. We're like, we'll just put in a little pilot kit. We had the 50-litre pilot that we'd done some good beer Wheatie brews on. Let's just effectively go a slightly larger version of that in an existing woodshed, fine. And then we're like, nah, we're going to do it. Let's do it properly, over-engineer it. So actually made a time-lapse film of it, which is a lot of fun. And a little GoPro on the ceiling, knocked down the woodshed and built a very small, like it literally only 36 square meters. That's all council would allow us to do initially. We couldn't go out, we could go up. So it's it's a giraffe of a building, which makes it seem a lot bigger than it is, and it's quite a pleasant space to be in. Very small. So we got Premier Stainless 600 litre kit, 3 single batch fermenters, and a separate little mill room. So tiny little setup, keg washer. So, it was self-sufficient. I spoke to a lot of local brewers about brewery design and interstate brewers as well, and again, a lot of people very generous with their time and ideas, and we poured our first beers in 2014. So that was again just wanted to walk the walk. Plenty of dubious beer theories that I wanted to test out. A lot of friends in breweries around the country and around the world, and again, after having collaborated on the 50 litre kit. Perfect example. We get a guest brewer coming over. Not too many brewers will say no to a collaboration, particularly 10 years ago, and they're brewing at much bigger breweries and often are not on the tools anymore, and they miss it. So we brewed with Tobias Zolo from Weinstefano. It's like, that's just insane that we, and he had a ball. I was terrified, and he had a ball because he just doesn't get to do that anymore. And to get, do it on someone else's kit, where you can, blame them for anything that doesn't go right. It's a win-win situation.
And did you go straight in and with taking over all the taps, or at the start was it like, we'll have a bank of wheatie and we'll still keep supporting our friends in the beer industry elsewhere?
We were so small, like with the 3 single batch fermenters and 600 litres, that we, even if we wanted to supply all our taps, we couldn't. So initially it was only like 3 or 4 taps, I think, and then eventually a font. After about a year or two, we had a font, and then it wasn't till we expanded. So we, pushed into the car park fermentation alley, where we more than doubled capacity and floor space, that we could sustain all of our taps. So the first ever brews on our original brewery were for Good Beer Wheatie. Again, like everyone's experience, there were council holdups, there were SA Power Networks holdups, so everything happened a lot later than it should have. So instead of having a couple of months to get to learn the kit, learn what the buttons do, essentially, the very first day we brewed, it was a collaboration with Yeasty Boys, Yeasty Boy Stew, and
spooning.
Spooning, yes. It was a collaboration at that point. Following years it was spooning, but yes, essentially spooning. And Leo DiVincenzo from Birra del Borgo, and Magic Rock Stew. So it was kind of like a rock star collaboration. We'd never brewed on the kit beyond the first commissioning brew, which was a bit of a disaster. We didn't have our excise license. So it was still, going back and forth, and literally got to the end of the first day, and I'm checking emails, and I'd called the ATO, obviously, saying, listen, this is what we're going to do. Am I safe to do it? And they're like, yeah, just don't pitch yeast till you get your license. I'm like,
just make work.
Okay, so excellent. So we've got these, these international brewers we're collaborating with, but that's fine. Like, we'll just go through the motions. And it literally came through, an hour and a half before we pitched the yeast. So I didn't have to make that decision, thankfully. I know what I would have done, but I didn't have to make that decision. So it was right down to the wire. And then once we expanded Fermentation Alley, we could then sustain all of our own taps. So and we still pour other breweries' beers, but as a showcase.
And how have you managed that, I guess, from a brewery and also consumer perspective? The Wheatie had this reputation as, you could go there any time of the year and it would have the most fantastic, well-curated, diverse lineup of beers from breweries all over the place. And then some point it was like just your beers, which are great. Obviously, you've got the trophies to prove it. But that would have been a bit of a change of experience for both brewers who you were long-standing friends with, but also I guess for consumers as well, going, well, this is the place we go to in Adelaide with the biggest diversity of beers. Was that did that matter to people, or was it something you had to work
definitely
through?
mattered. Yeah, and it was certainly a risk, because we were a very, very successful venue pouring other people's beers. I knew other people would catch on eventually. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, and there were, it was a good decade really before other venues in Adelaide started taking craft seriously, and having a decent range. And even we predate most, if not all, of the Melbourne venues as well in terms of being craft beer specialist bars. I think we even pipped the Royston by a few months. So it was definitely a risk. We could have just continued doing what we're doing, and it would have been fine. It would have, early days, the challenge was sort of dragging people kicking and screaming into beer with flavour. but increasingly that it was competition. So there, instead of us, getting the only keg of Cantillon, we couldn't sell Cantillon to begin with. No one wanted it. There were Canty Tanties because people thought we were trying to sell them beer that was off. And we'd drink it, and we'd have one or two customers who loved it, and that was it. And then, it took a while again, but then in a few years, we couldn't get it. We just couldn't source it because it was in demand so much. So the everything was changing. And again, for us, the whole point of the, so we were pouring other people's beers, they were brewing it at their breweries. We wanted to brew beer at our own brewery. Definitely a risk. We definitely, some punters didn't like it. Like, they wanted to still come here and drink other beers. I get that. In some cases, there was also, people wanted to drink beers from overseas regardless of freshness. Yeah. And there was the perception that, it's from US and it's an IPA. From the US, it's an IPA, so it is by definition better than anything that's going to be here. So that, some of it was fair enough. Some of it, I think, was based on misconception. And also, I think some of it is it is the notion of diversity is interesting too. So, I had a punter the other day to say, you used to have such a diversity on tap. And I looked at the tap list and I said, find me another venue at this point in time anywhere in the country that is covering that diversity of styles. So it's not just hazies, it's not just IPAs and pales, and not just lagers, and you're getting oak fermented stuff, and you're getting co-fermented stuff, and you're getting hand pull traditional ale, and you've got a Luca side pour, and it range. What do you mean by range? If you mean IPAs from 6 different breweries, no, you're right, we don't have that. If you mean a diversity of styles, then we do. And if we do it, we'll do it as well as we can. So we've used 50, 60, 70 different yeasts or more. We experiment, we play a lot. There's a lot of work in the little brewery. We do a lot of things. And surely, again, I go back to this thing, of beer is best drunk in the shadow of the brewery in which it's brewed. I don't want to go to Sydney or Melbourne and drink my beer. I want to drink what's made there.
Unless it's pint of origin, obviously.
Unless it's
pint of origin, obviously.
Of course, but even then, I wouldn't drink my beer. No way, I wouldn't. But I want to drink what's made locally. Yeah. So definitely there was a bit of pushback. And obviously, to begin with, we had to learn the ropes in terms of the brewery, and we didn't release anything we didn't think stood up, but we definitely learnt a lot in time as well, and become better brewers, better at the whole process. So but I think overall was an enormous amount of support, and I think overall people got it, and it's like, this is the natural conclusion, because a lot of what we've always done ticketed tastings and encourage kind of thinking drinking. We want people to know as much as possible about what they're drinking, whether it's whiskey, wine, beer, and we have visiting brewers and distillers and winemakers, and we go deep with this kind of stuff, and a lot of our punters, they really enjoy that, and at the time, certainly sort of 20 years ago, like, we believe we had some of the first ever whiskey tastings of their kind anywhere in the world. Like, we were looking at whiskey faults. People were paying good money to drink shit whiskey. And pull it apart. We put whiskies through spectrometers to analyze different peat phenolics and stuff like that. There was almost none of that happening 20 years ago. There's not that much happening now. It's more common now, but that whole culture of thinking drinking, and involving anyone. We're a pub, so that, one of the things I love about pubs is democratic. The pub is a good leveler. We're not a specialist bar that sort of caters to people who have one kind of interest. We're generalists in that respect. It's like anyone does walk through the door. And one of my favorite things still is kind of ambushing people with good beer. They might come to see a band. They're here for the music. We ambush them with good beer. They might come for a whiskey. We ambush them with good beer. They might come for a beer, and we ambush them with good wine. Because we're serious about our wine list as well. So it's just it's democratic. It's accessible. We basically pitch at anyone who's genuinely interested in flavor and character, like, we'll find something for you, rather than, just pitching it at, at Hazy Boys, or just pitching it at, that doesn't interest me. And that's not what a pub is, or what a pub should do. A pub is community, warts and all, and it's much broader, and it's more democratic.
Talking about community from a Wheaty perspective, we talked about beer, whiskey, but you've also been a great supporter of the arts, of live music. beyond that as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think especially, I guess, indie music and indie beer are often facing the same challenges with either venues being closed down or regulation changing against them. Is that something that...
And also some very big operators
Yes, yes.
holding them back as well.
Yeah, we're very fond of monopolies and duopolies in this country. So there are a lot of similarities between music industry and beer industry. Increasingly, the elephant in the room is those foreign-based, publicly listed multinationals that own more and more of the Australian live music industry. And there was an article in Sydney Morning Herald a couple of years ago. Michael Sainsbury, I think, was the journo, and he was interviewing various players in the Australian live music industry, and they posited that up to 85% of Australian live music industry was owned by Live Nation, AEG, and TEG, the big three. And they're genius. They're vertically integrated. They own the entire supply chain. So they own venues, they own festivals, they own ticketing companies, which is where they make most of their money. They own merch. They take merch cuts, promotion companies, agency, etc., etc. And increasingly, they're kind of Death Star multinationals. They kind of draw you in with their tractor beam. And if you don't play with them, you don't have a career as a musician potentially, and as an independent venue trying to, operate alongside them is pretty tricky stuff.
You've basically chosen all the areas that are really hard to succeed in and like try to make things as hard for yourself as often as you can.
Pretty much, if we only told the bank, no, we want to be an original live music venue. They were sure, how much money do you want? Yeah, I mean, we think the beer industry is in trouble. I think, grassroots live music is in deep trouble, and there are it depends on the metric, but anywhere upwards of 30% of independent live music venues are closed during and since COVID, and there's no sign of that letting up really. So yeah, it's catastrophic. Where you do have literally the top end of town making record profits, and you've got grassroots venues on their knees and closing, like the system is broken. And where you get, for example, the top end of town not only being enabled by governments, federal and state, but being subsidised directly. Often, Harvest Rock Festival got state government money. That's a Live Nation event, or indirectly because they're not paying, like any self-respecting multinational, they're not paying as much tax as they should be, shall we say. And that's a problem, and it's going to get to the point where we don't have any original live music anymore.
Well, what we found is interesting was we're also, obviously it's been happening at the Wheatie all the time, but, and I guess it's on a small scale, but a number of breweries offering or adding some sort of music offering. So just recently, Three Ravens turned their storage warehouse into a venue for labels to come in and do showcase nights or to do DJ nights or whatever. And there's Seeker. There are places around the country getting behind music. Often there might be musicians behind the brewery. Is there feasibly some way of independent beer and independent music coming together to have a greater voice, do you think, or are they both so caught up in fighting their own battles?
A bit of both. So I mean, yeah, definitely. Each is just sort of fighting for survival, and in with venues, and there already is. I think it already. So just as there are breweries who are supporting live music, there are live music venues that are supporting independent breweries as well. So I'm just thinking of a handful of our live music venues here, and they will pour either predominantly or exclusively local craft breweries, and they have partnerships with those breweries, which is excellent. And I think one of the best ways, we just need to support each other in that sense. So buy local. Keep local alive, I think is still very much the case. Even ridiculous things like post-mix, like go local. Go local softies, like support local business. And thing with that, I mean, it's important, but it's also a slower burn. And I think with live music, it's crisis for a lot of venues, and it's got to the point that they literally week to week. And you got shows that even here that would pre-COVID would fill the room, and now getting 50-60%, and that's kind of par. And then every now and then you get a show that is absolutely
that's a cost of living related thing?
That's a large part of it, yeah, definitely. And people who who tend to go out to pubs to see music are getting smashed, whether they're renters or they've just got a mortgage or whatever. There's not a lot of disposable income there. And demand has changed as well. I think people culturally, I think there's been change as well. People are used to staying at home. Everything can be delivered. Everything is streamable. There's everything's vicarious now. So that's part of it. And it'll be really interesting to see, when and if cost of living pressures ease, if people come back. And I think that's the $1 million question that we're all kind of hanging on, is if there is an upturn and an uptick, will people start coming out again? Anecdotally, a lot of our punters are like, look, we'd love to come here more often, but we just can't afford it. We're paying another $200 a week in rent, or our mortgage has gone up, or whatever. But also, I think people are kind of used to chucking on the trackies and the Uggies and ordering everything in. And
I really just need to get them out once or twice, either just into a good pub to have a good time, or to go to a gig of whatever size it might be, to go, why am I not doing this more often?
Why am I doing this? Yeah.
This is what I work and live for, really, is to get out and have these moments, I think.
Yeah, and then, I mean, obviously very vested in this, but I think that, throughout humanity, like, people have always needed this. They've always needed, social interaction. They've always needed to go out and listen to live music. There is something completely different about seeing a band live. You feel it. Like, it's an emotional thing. You feel the music live. You feel the interaction of the band and the audience. Like, you can't get that any other way. And same with going out for a beer. You can have catch-ups online and so on. It's not the same thing. Like, and people need that. And I like to think that people will always need that, or we're all buggered.
Pubs and inns have been around a long time. And survived a long time.
They're also closing at a rate of knots. And certainly independent pubs are. And I guess that's my concern. There'll always be music, and there will always be pubs, and there'll always be hospitality, and there'll always be breweries, but what are they going to be like?
And how many owners will there be, or
Correct.
how many operators in the industry?
Exactly right. There'll be two.
Yeah.
There'll be two, and subsidiaries, and a lot of our content will be AI, created, and I just think it'll be shopping mall central, and I think that's the concern. There will always be these things, but we're just losing the owner operators, and people doing anything interesting, really, and it just becomes cookie cutter kind of stuff and lowest common denominator stuff, and that's pretty scary.
Jade, we talked about sustainability and sustainable businesses before, and sort of running them. Obviously, you've done it at the Weedy for a long time, but originally there were 3 of you, and now it's just you. I can't think of too many sort of beer businesses that have lasted in that way, and where it now is a sole ownership. Like how have you sort of managed that, or how's it felt?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So it was 3 of us, and then 2016, Trotty died, so at cancer, and that was while we'd had a couple of years to prepare ourselves for that. It still was obviously hit pretty hard. And I had a broken back at the time as well. So just
one of many ailments you've been
that was where it all started to unravel. 2016 was a time. That was absolutely awful, obviously. And Trotty was a dear friend, so that was pretty rough. And then it was Liz and myself, and obviously there was like big shake-ups, and how are we gonna negotiate this? And for a couple of years, we just kind of just changed. You did what we had to do to get through that period, basically. And then, as these things tend to do, death teaches us how to live. Cautionary tale, and Liz decided she wanted to do other things. It was like she didn't want to continue with the Weedy. It kind of lost the love. Whereas I still very much, this is what I want to do.
You cut the Weedy and it bleeds Jade.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, 22 years. I can't. It's difficult remembering like before the Weedy, post Weedy. A few ideas what that might look like, but it's a pretty daunting thought. So I was still absolutely committed to the pub. So then it was a question of, right, Liz was going to leave, then I had to, bite it. And I'm a control freak, so I never liked the idea of being accountable to anyone really, other than, lawyers and bankers in a strict sense, in terms of what we want to do. Because a lot of what we've done here doesn't make sense financially. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in lots of ways. A lot of it has worked. Some of it hasn't. But, I kind of, it's take that. It's my responsibility. It's like I live and die by the sword. Like it's, if I fuck up, then I fuck up. But I don't want to have to answer to shareholders, for example. That doesn't interest me at all. That's not why I got into my own business. I'm pretty much unemployable, I think. No one would have me because I'm so used to doing things in my own way. So that was not an option, and it was not an option for me to give up the Weedy. And it's very important going forward that the Weedy stays the Weedy. So it was negotiating that, and then again more time talking to banks, and then we got there over, in the end. And again, thankfully, it was a year before COVID, so it was 2019. Became sole owner, benevolent dictator, as I like to say. A year before COVID. If it had been COVID had been a year earlier, then it would have been seriously problematic. Like I would have been in a lot of trouble because it took me a year to kind of turn the ship around, reorganize things. There was a lot of work to be done, and I was changing because at that point I was probably 75% in the brewery, 25% bar and overall business. Then I basically had to be 50-50. So a lot of stuff to turn around. If COVID was a year earlier, I would have been in proper trouble. So again, it's one of those, there's a bit of a narrative that, is shaking down the industry, and the places that needed to go are going. And I think that's, it's a bit like Darwin's, natural selection. So much of it's just dumb luck.
Yeah.
So much of it is dumb luck and timing. You do something in a certain time and it makes sense in the context of the time, global pandemic, and suddenly that investment looks like a really silly thing. And it's like, what the fuck was I thinking? So pulled that together. But of course, in all of this, like I'm not running it by myself. So my partner, Maeve, and I are effectively running it. She runs the bar side of things, wine list, yada, yada, yada. It kept, held me together over some very, very tricky years with my own health problems. And we have a fantastic team. So, Jimmy in the brewery now, like, you can't run a pub on your own. So yeah, culturally, I think things have changed around the industry. And again, I really hope that comes back. And I hope that as, things pick up and people are going out more and there's more of the fun side of things, that people will see this as a viable industry. But again, it needs to be sustainable to be viable, and at the moment no one in their right mind really would run a original live music venue with a brewery out the back, but obviously I'm a lot of skin in the game.
So you're way too deep.
Yeah.
It's like
Way
me with
too
crafty
deep.
pine. What else am I going to do?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is, as I said, unemployable and a lot of skin in the game.
Yeah.
So I'm not going anywhere. And the thing for me is that this continues to be, I'd see myself as a guardian of a caretaker of the pub, essentially. And there is something about pubs, unlike any other kind of venue, and just it's that continuity. This is what they're built for. This is what they do. They're a public house, and I think that's kind of special. And there aren't many places like that anymore where you can just be. You don't even have to spend any money. You can just be. You can sit in the paper and have a glass of water and read the paper. You can come in jeans and t-shirt. You can come in a suit. There aren't many places left where you can do that, and I think that's really important. So when eventually I move on, the goal, and not quite sure how this is going to happen, is for the Wheatie to be the Wheatie.
Yeah.
So whether it's kind of a venues trust kind of situation where effectively selling the freehold to a venues trust, which then rents back to operators as grassroots music venues like the MVT in the UK, which is a fantastic model. So more and more people I'm talking to are thinking about those kinds of models, because we want this to survive beyond
And survive as it is. Yeah.
give or take.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously
yeah.
people can give it their local flavor, but I want it, in 100 years, ideally, I want this to still be a pub. I want it to be a community pub, no pokies, original live music and beer, and I think a lot of people want that. And I quite frankly, I think there are people staying in the industry for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might be ready to move on. Not me yet, but ready to move on. But they want what they've created to remain as a thing, because I think it's worthwhile in the broader sense. I think we need places like this, not exactly like this, but this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think for all of our sanity and humanity, really.
You're almost uniquely positioned to sort of take an overview of the evolution of beer and hospo over the last 20-25 years. What have been some of the best, or maybe even the worst, sort of trends or changes you've seen over that time? Because you really have experienced and been a part of so much of it.
The evolution of craft, I guess, and of beer and good beer. And 22 years ago, if you'd asked me like what do you think will be the beer scene in a couple of decades time, would have been thrilled at how much good beer there is everywhere. And I think that was always kind of the base thing, is like, we want there to be good locally brewed beer pretty much everywhere you go. We want it to be mainstream, and it is, which is fantastic. You can get good beer pretty much anywhere. A lot of that good beer, though, now has come to be owned by 2 or 3 big companies, and I think that again, it's the evolution of it. Initially I think craft beer was poo-pooed by the big companies and by Coopers. It wasn't taken seriously, and then obviously as it became established and was became something that was here to stay. However big a part of the market, it was here to stay, and had changed beer here permanently. Then obviously there was going to be pushback then, and the more successful it became, the more attractive it became, and then a lot of interest, and rather than people getting involved because they loved beer, loved hospitality, wanted to see how far they could go with something, it then became something we would, the Craft Bankers Conference, in America, for example. So, and it suddenly becomes something supermarkets are interested in, and so on and so on. So I think, obviously the danger of that is that it's ripping the soul out of beer, and I think there's a bit of cynicism from punters now, largely in response to that. If all these breweries that swear by independence are selling out, then you're sort of eroding that trust. So that's I guess one of the downturns in it. I think beer being more widely available, and being available to all. So I think we've shaken up beer culture now, and I think it's a much more egalitarian industry in a lot of respects. And if it's not, we're aware of the fact that it isn't, and we're talking about the fact that it isn't. So, I would like to think it's still a sexist industry, but we're calling that shit out now, and I think, and it's a discussion that we can have, and it's, we've always said, one rule at the Weedy, don't care who you are, what you look like, up until the point which you're a dickhead, you're welcome. Like, everyone's welcome unless you're a dickhead. It's that simple. And we've sort of taken a similar approach to, barrel aging beers. Is like, you need to, if you barrel age beers, wild ferments, you need to be prepared to throw out often and much. And we take the same approach to our punters. Like,
so dickhead beers, you have,
they're gone, they're done. It's like, and it's not a particularly high bar, but some people, guys, struggled to make it there. But it's a daily thing. It's not just having a policy, it's not just being able to point to something, it's practice, and it's praxis, and it's every day. It's like, nah, not okay, pull your head in or you're out. And it's like, no, you're out, done. And that kind of stuff. And over that 20 years, definitely seen a change, and overall a change for the better. Again, there's backlash. An American president is certainly evidence of that, and so definitely backlash. But I think progress has been made, and I think that is a really positive thing. And beer has been seen more as it's less just blokey, and it's more something anyone and everyone can potentially should enjoy. So that's a real positive.
Jade, what about the future of beer? Like where do you hope it goes? What are your sort of wishes for where it's heading as well?
Spazer is a new craft. I think it's lager. Again,
literally got the t-shirt.
Yeah. It's come full circle, and as much as joked about it, I think now, again, ironically, we're getting to the point where lager could potentially be a gateway beer, which is kind of the opposite of where we were 20 years ago. So people are trying craft lager and go, wow, this is amazing. Let's head into this. So more like, definitely there'll be more lager, and I think cleaner flavors, and sadly, I think there's going to be more consolidation, and I think there's going to be increasing issues with the big end of town, and particularly at a time from a venue perspective where venues are struggling as well. So I think the economic pressures for them are to go with what's safe and what is cheap, and easy.
Hard to say no.
Exactly right, and it's harder to support indies, particularly if they're charging what they need to be charging, when as a venue you're under pressure yourself. So I think that's one of the other real shames about this, is that a lot of venues that would have supported independent at the moment, they just can't. And so hopefully when and if there's an uptick, that they jump back on that. So I hope, I mean, it's really hard time, and I think we'll see more closures, and I think we'll see more venues closing. There'll be more consolidation, and I think the big end of town are gonna the Empire Strikes Back. Some will get through, definitely, and I think and there will be continue to be independent brewers. I think the beers are getting better and better. I think the standard of brewing is just getting higher and higher, which is amazing. I think we have amazing suppliers now. Local yeast producers, local maltsters, local small indie hop growers, all that kind of stuff is really, really exciting. And I think, technically now, much, much higher level. So all that kind of stuff, I think the beer itself is heading in a better direction. I think punters, there is a base level now of appreciation for good beer that is fantastic and is more than we could have hoped for 20 years ago. And as an indication of how mainstream beer has got, not often that a punter kind of surprises me after 30 years in pubs, but a guy came in the other day. He's looking at the taps, and we still get this, because we're a Western Suburbs pub. So, people rock into the bar and they're looking at the taps and they don't recognise any of them. And he's just looking up and down, up and down. He goes, "Oh, I'm sick of all this fucking craft shit. I just want a pint of hazy." It's like, that is comic genius. That is comic genius.
Yeah. And by hazy, did he mean Cooper's Pale?
Yeah, no, he meant a hazy pale, hazy IPA, and I was like, wow, that is comic genius.
Yeah.
But he meant it, and it to the point where he, his regular drinking beer was a hazy pale, hazy IPA, and anything that wasn't that was craft shit. So it was awesome,
Yeah.
So it's a good thing, I think, that we got to that point, and there's no going back. I think once you're onto this stuff. So I think been a lot of gains. I think independent hospitality is under pressure. Grassroots live music venues are under extreme pressure. Independent breweries under extreme pressure. But it's just hold fast.
Yeah.
Hold fast and stick to quality. As much as is possible. Just make the best possible beer you can. Stick to your guns and hope. Basically just hope that it turns around. And I again invested in this because this is my life. But I think people will come back to it. There is something fundamentally human, the human need to to catch up with people and have a drink and talk, to listen to live music, to feel live music, all that kind of stuff. I think if we've moved so far away from that we can't support the venues who provide that, then it's it would be a pretty sad
So I guess
world.
the hope is almost that consumers make the effort to find out who the indie brewers are, where the indie venues are, or whatever, where the indie live music is, and get behind it. And if they give a shit about it, tell their friends, bring them along, and make them part of the magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as ever, where you spend your money really matters, and it still really, really, really matters. And just think about where where you're spending your money, and little bits count. And so if you want it to be there, support it. Support what you love, or it might not be there much longer. And it sounds very melodramatic, but the reality is we are losing, as you guys have written about. So many breweries, so many venues, so many live music venues are closing, and they're not gonna, they're not coming back. You can't flick a switch and bring them back.
There's
and
not a lot of apartments being knocked down to build pubs in either.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, maybe that's something we can hope for in the future, is that these kind of pop-up dog boxes are knocked down, and then we replace them with live music venues and breweries and brew pubs. That would be awesome. But on a very dry level, like some kind of protection. So that, I don't know if you were over it, but the Crown and Anchor, which is a famous live music pub in the city, was slated to be knocked down by developers and turned into student accommodation, and huge community pushback on that, which is excellent. And it now looks like it's not a silver bullet, but it looks like there'll be some protection for live music venues in the CBD. Obviously, we want to extend that protection beyond that, and for it to be a planning overlay, essentially. And say this is a grassroots original live music venue, and this is designated because it ticks these criteria, which is, independent, it's original live music on a dedicated stage, dedicated PA, dedicated sound engineers. Therefore, all this stuff follows from that. So, for example, have, 10 temporary change of use a year. So you can have your street festivals without having to, bleed for council and work for them for a week. All these things to actually support these venues. If we value them, we need to support them. And, if we don't invest, certainly when it comes to live music venues, if we don't invest immediately and Top End of Town doesn't reinvest in grassroots, without which they wouldn't survive, we're just going to be left with a heap of highly paid administrators and no industry to administer.
Yeah, and nobody wants that.
No. Well, it will drink us, drive us all to drink, I think.
And there'll be nowhere left to drink.
Exactly right.
Jade, thank you so much for this has been such a thrilling conversation.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure. And, we've got another couple of hours. We could.
Well, no, otherwise there'd be no live music happening behind us tonight.
Yes, no, exactly.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Jade.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
One of the best things about this craft beer industry of ours is the way everyone shares, collaborates, and lends a helping hand when needed. But as so often happens, those good deeds can sometimes go unnoticed. Well, now with the support of Rallings Labels, Stickers and Packaging, who are themselves known for their outstanding service and strong relationships with the industry, we're delighted to give every good beer citizen a bit of well-deserved recognition. We're calling on you to nominate anyone who's gone out of their way to help you out. It doesn't matter how big or small, it's just a wonderful way to give that person or business a shout out and thank you. We'll highlight the best nominees on the Crafty Pint podcast, and lucky winners of the Done a Rallings Good Deed will win a Rallings gift voucher and earn a big thumbs up from friends and colleagues. So what are you waiting for? Give that good deed a shout out. Head to craftypint.com/rallings and nominate today.
The Crafty Pint podcast is produced and edited by Matt Hoffman. You can get all your beer-related news and reviews on the Crafty Pint website, craftypint.com, and can stay up to date on future podcast episodes via our socials.
We wouldn't be able to produce the podcast or the website, events or festivals we run without the support of the beer industry, whether that's suppliers, bars, breweries or bottle shops. If you'd like to support the show or partner with the Crafty Pint in other ways, please reach out to Craig via the details in the show notes.
And if you're a beer lover who'd like to support what we do, you can join our exclusive club for beer lovers, the Crafty Cabal. Visit craftykabal.com for more.
And until next time, drink good beer.